I postponed sharing this story for an extended period, to be completely honest. I thought I would never disclose it to anyone. However, as time flows, it follows its course and gradually erases the intense emotions I once experienced. Let me begin by providing some context for my story. It happened about 8 or 9 years ago. I can't recall the exact year, whether it was 2014 or 2015. It was autumn, with a gloomy, rainy atmosphere, typical for the latter part of the season. At that time, I was a university student, and I had returned to my small village, home to around 5,000 residents, for the weekend from the regional city. My grandmother lived in the same building as me, on the same floor, so I often visited her. One day while visiting my grandmother, I overheard a conversation about an old witch living on the outskirts of the village. To my surprise, my grandmother happened to know one of her relatives. Intrigued by this, I wondered if I should pay a visit to this mysterious woman to break the monotony of the dull, gray autumn days. I asked my grandmother to inquire through her connections if I could visit the old woman. However, I didn't hold much hope of it happening. So, it was quite astonishing when my grandmother informed me, 2 weeks later, that I was welcome to visit the witch on a specific day and time. I was instructed to bring a gift as a token of respect. Accustomed to the bustling city life, the constant presence of large crowds, and the overflow of information, I embarked on this journey with a small pouch containing the gifts, following the beaten path leading through the desolate wasteland. I didn't realize it then, but now it's clear that something was set in motion from that moment. The sky loomed overhead with colossal clouds that seemed to press down on me, while the cold, unfriendly wind cut through the air. An indescribable feeling settled within me, one of bewilderment and anxiety, which overtook my initial curiosity. I questioned myself, wondering where I was headed and why. However, it felt as if there was no turning back, an inexplicable certainty urging me forward, even though I didn't know why. It was as though I was being torn away from my familiar and comprehensible world, and I was unsure of my own identity, my surroundings, and my purpose. Nevertheless, step by step, my feet guided me to the designated address. The old woman's house was situated on the far edge of the street, unremarkable and indistinguishable from the others. I cannot recall the specific details of the house's appearance, not even its color. In essence, it was a typical, dilapidated, rustic home. I approached it almost mechanically, as though in a daze, and knocked timidly on the door, which curiously lacked a lock. The door didn't open immediately. The elderly woman cautiously inquired, "Who's there?" After introducing myself and explaining how I was connected to her, the door finally opened. My memory blurs regarding how I entered her home, bypassing the so-called front corridor. Yet, there I was, seated on an old sofa, engaging in casual conversation, as if I had simply dropped by to chat with a neighbor. However, at a particular moment, the tone and volume of our conversation shifted abruptly, and she posed a direct, almost accusatory question. "Well, what do you want? Why have you come here? Are you seeking to someone or exact revenge?" I can't put a name to the state I found myself in at that moment. It was as though I were in some kind of trance. I mumbled something about not really wanting anything specific, only seeking to hear her stories and secrets. Then, she fixed her gaze upon me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine and spoke in an angry, almost shouting voice. "So, that's why you've come. You desire my power. You wish to become all-powerful, to be like a god. Take that, you audacious scoundrel." Following this declaration, I suddenly realized that I was immobilized, unable to move or utter a word. Something heavy and dark began to grow in my solar plexus, expanding like a snowball. I couldn't even moan. I was drenched in sweat, tears streaming down my face, while she stared at me without blinking. I was certain that her eyes were not directed at a human being, but at something else entirely. My thoughts were incoherent, much like in a dream. Deep within myself, I remembered that I needed to perform a baptism or recite a prayer. I was unfamiliar with any prayers, and I couldn't undergo baptism, as if my body was no longer mine. It was like a scene from a horror movie, where a person is possessed by a demon and can only passively observe the events. I attempted to envision a cross in my mind, to implore God and the angels for assistance, to swear to myself that I would never again indulge in mysticism or similar pursuits. I cannot gauge how much time passed. It felt like an eternity. Tears flowed incessantly, and I remained helpless, descending into an abyss. But then, I heard a voice in my mind, emanating from within me. It was a voice of unknown origin, unlike any I had ever encountered, and it instructed me to remember who you are. It is challenging to convey, but it was akin to this. I began to recollect my childhood, my parents, my grandmothers, my friends, and a peculiar strength began to swell within me, as if I were regaining control over myself. Alongside the cold, heavy sensation in my chest, there emerged a gentle, pleasant warmth. It was akin to a breath of fresh air, and I continued to relive cherished moments of my life, my fondest memories, much like a slideshow. My body trembled in waves, I shook uncontrollably, and I believe my voice nearly failed me. Summoning every ounce of my willpower, I upright and, at last, managed to flee that accursed house as if escaping a scolding sauna. I nearly forgot my shoes in the hallway, but I kicked the door open and sprinted away without looking back. The world outside was shrouded in darkness and emptiness. What transpired next remains a mystery to this day. I still get chills when recalling this story, yet I can't recall how I made it home or what unfolded afterward. I refrained from discussing it with my grandmother. I refrained from visiting my hometown for a few weeks, and it goes without saying that I had trouble sleeping for a long time. Nightmares pursued me like a sinister specter following a comet. Fortunately, I gradually managed to ground myself. Upon returning to the city, I immersed myself in the ocean of information, focusing on natural sciences, endeavoring to erase every trace of that gray, rainy day. It felt as though I had sealed myself within an alternate reality, where the old woman and her nightmarish experiences couldn't reach me. I ceased reading mystical stories and watching the supernatural films that had captivated me since childhood. It's perplexing, but I'm not even sure if it was real or not. I am not insane, yet it felt as though the events had transpired to someone else. However, so much time has elapsed since then, and that's why I can now share this tale. The most critical realization I've garnered from this encounter is that I was always in search of a connection with something higher, be it God, angels, demons, witches, or other entities. Nonetheless, I understand now that I never truly believed in God. I genuinely yearned to have faith, but crosses, the Bible, and church traditions held no meaning for me. For me personally, though it may differ for others, I discovered that God is not an external entity, but an internal one, residing within me and always ready to protect my soul. I need only love myself and the people around me with sincerity and without restraint. My passions, my pursuits, my adoration for the people and experiences I hold dear, the flavors of delicious food, beloved animals, and cherished games, all these things fill me with a radiant energy that renders me impervious to evil. I now recognize that God resides within me, always attentive to my needs, provided I continue to love with an open heart, pursue my true passions, and listen to my own inner voice.